Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a couple pieces of legislation in today that have some people talking, right? And I find this interesting because we're starting to see attorneys general and state governors, particularly of red states, making aggressive moves following the lifting of COVID restrictions. And I think they might be trying to make up some of the political capital that they expended in pushing forward with some of these things. Greg Abbott eventually bent the knee on mask mandates and closing down some businesses, and now he stands poised to undo some of the damage that he did to his own political name, and we're seeing the same thing happen in other states as well. But what that tends to mean, at least when it's a Republican doing it these days, is a push towards conservatism. And I think a lot of states actually could use that right now, even conservative strongholds like Texas. So let's talk about what he has signed into law today about critical race theory and about the closing of religious institutions. I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer. I'm also a legal and political commentator on YouTube and on Odyssey. Wherever you're watching, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on the notifications. Don't miss any videos. What are you even doing if you miss videos? Oh my goodness. All right, so we've got two stories here. I'm going to do a short one on this religious freedom law. And then we'll talk a little bit longer about the critical race theory one because I find it to be pretty interesting. This one is very straightforward. Abbott signs religious freedom law prohibiting government from closing places of worship. HB 1239 prohibits government officials and agencies from ordering houses of worship closed. Can't do it. Can't shut them down. Don't shut down this stuff. Now, I know some of you out there don't care about religion or the right to religion, but this is considered an essential right. It's in the First Amendment. Your right to freely worship or not worship at your choosing is there, and this is to undo some of the political damage that was done when these places of worship were closed down and severely affected during the COVID lockdown. At the end of the day, that's what it was. Supporters of Greg Abbott are not happy that he eventually ended up capitulating here. Let's take a look. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a law prohibiting government agencies and officials in the state from ordering churches and other houses of worship to close. The Lone Star State's governor announced the move in a tweet on Tuesday, pledging that Americans' First Amendment freedoms would be protected in the state by prohibiting the government from issuing orders that close or have the effect of closing places of worship in the state. So they can't do it. Can't do it anymore. State Rep Scott Sanford, a Republican from the Dallas area, filed the bill which states a government agency or public official may not issue an order that closes or has the effect of closing places of worship in the state or in a geographic area of the state. Churches provide essential spiritual, mental, and physical support in time of crisis. Closing churches not only eliminated these critical ministries and services, but it violated their religious freedom granted by our laws and Constitution. So that is what's going on here. Greg Abbott is trying to make up for this. Republicans are trying to make up for this. They realize how much they burned their own constituents by giving into these COVID restrictions. But let's move on to what I think is a little bit more interesting on this one. That's Governor Abbott signs anti-critical race theory bill into law over objections from educators and civic groups. And all I could say to them is, lol, get wrecked. No one cares. No one cares about your objections anymore. Opponents say the Texas law, which goes into effect September 1st, will have a chilling effect on schools. Let's take a look at this one. This is from Dallas Morning News. Both of these articles will be linked down in the description if you want to click on them. So Texas on Tuesday became the latest conservative state to bar certain concepts related to race and racism from being discussed in the classroom, ignoring the passionate objections of educators who say the new law will make it harder for them to teach about America's true past and present. It actually won't. It won't make it any harder. People have been teaching about the racial history of the United States for a very long time. I don't think a lot of people are confused about the fact that slavery and the Jim Crow era existed, or the amount of effort that was required to undo those things. Most of us learned about the Civil War. Most of us learned about the Civil Rights Movement. Most of us learned those things in junior high and high school. These are not weird concepts or whatever. What they're not being allowed to teach is that you are bad because you are white, and that you hate black people because you are white. That's what they're not being allowed to teach, because it isn't true. It isn't true. And critical race theory makes these distinctions not based on research or science or anything like that, but actually it makes these distinctions as a presupposition to what's going on. You have to presuppose the inherent hatred of the person to use critical race theory in the way it's intended. And people can debate the usefulness. I've stated that under very limited specific academic purposes, you can derive use from various critical theories. Now, that's a controversial thing to say, I guess, that under limited academic study, you can derive meaning using critical theory, which is intended to derive meaning, but it's not useful in K through 12 education. It's just not, because they're not engaging in that level of academic study. They're not engaging in targeted academic study on race because they're K through 12. It's not that purpose of that level of education. We're talking significantly higher education with significant focuses on these and other issues in which this could be utilized. A very limited subset of academic use, but it's there. This does not belong in elementary schools, in junior highs, in high schools. A bill that legislators say sought to ban critical race theory in school but never define or mention the concept explicitly, because then they would just name it something else, stirred fear among educators that there could be repercussions for broaching current events during class. Let's take a look at what they're mad about. What does this law prohibit? While the legislation was labeled an anti-critical race theory bill, it doesn't actually contain those words. Instead, it includes a long list of subject and ideas that must or must not be taught. Critical race theory is an academic framework that explores how racism is embedded in U.S. policies and systems. It doesn't explore it. This is an important distinction. It presupposes that it is, and then reads things in with that context for the purposes of drawing out any type of criticism that could then be used for reform. You can do this with other things. You can actually have a conservative critical theory. You can have a liberal critical theory. You can have critical Marxist theory. You can have critical capitalist theory. And you can presuppose elements of whatever you're trying to study and then examine them with those presuppositions to see how you change outcomes. It can help you determine when there are various biases towards the subject you're looking for by assuming those biases and then examining it. Again, very high level education stuff, no purpose in K through 12 education. That's where this is being misunderstood and, of course, misreported by a media who wants to make this about racism. This isn't about racism. This is about the inappropriateness of telling kids that they are racist based on their skin color, which is inherently racist. Recently, though, this gets me right here. Conservative pundits and politicians have attempted to conflate it with a slew of other concepts such as diversity and inclusion efforts, anti-racism training, social justice activism, or multicultural curricula. No, they have not. In fact, the people developing these things, developing the diversity and inclusion efforts and anti-racism training, social justice activism, have used critical race theory as the basis for the reasons that these things are necessary. Because, I'll say it again, critical race theory presupposes systemic racism. If you presuppose systemic racism and look at the system and then say, oh, well, now we need to fix the systemic racism that I'm seeing, then you have just created the problem, and now you're working to fix the problem you created. It's quintessentially a straw man argument. That's why, again, this stuff isn't for broad purposes. It's for extremely narrow academic research. with intentionality and with full knowledge of what you're doing. When you arm idiots with critical race theory, you get idiotic results. And we're getting those idiotic results all over the place. So teachers can't be, quote, compelled to discuss a particular current event or widely debated and currently controversial issue of public policy or social affairs. So you can't force teachers to talk about current events that are controversial. According to the new law, in January, for example, teachers grappled with how to properly teach about the U.S. Capitol insurrection and the inauguration of the first female vice president. What, you don't need to teach any of this stuff being right or wrong. You can just relay facts and let children come to their conclusions. That's what you can do. It's amazing. It's shocking, knowing that the topics could be considered controversial, but that the issues were on students' minds. If schools do discuss such issues, they can't give deference to any one perspective. That provision enraged Democrats who question how teachers should, for example, explore both sides of the deadly white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Because remember, there aren't two sides to what happened in Charlottesville. There's only one side. There's only one side, only one narrative. That's all that's accepted. Everybody there is equally bad versus everybody else who is equally good. And that's the only possible outcome you can have. Teachers need to put that in students' minds. They can't explore it. This is amazing to me. This is amazing to me. People, and here's the real hypocrisy here. People who are pushing for critical race theory in schools, arguing that children in K through 12 education are equipped to deal with the subjects and topics and assumptions that critical race theory brings, will at the same time suggest that there is no nuance or alternative perspective to something like the Charlottesville protest. That's like saying that there's no nuance or perspective to Black Lives Matter or Antifa riots, that everybody there is equally bad, is equally doing the same things. We know this isn't true. We know there's a bunch of people protesting and they have peacefully assembled to legitimately voice their concerns. And then there's a subset of those of varying amounts who have nefarious purposes or criminal activity or criminal intent. And the same is true of Charlottesville, and the same is true of really everything. January 6th, all of these things have a multitude of people, some of them with specific aims, some of them with wildly divergent aims, but similar themes. And this level of nuance is not permissible for the same people who are saying that children are able to determine the level of nuance required to examine critical race theory and their own inherent and systemic hatred of their friend because of their skin color, each of their own respective skin colors. Yeah, this is the problem with teaching critical race theory in schools. They don't have faith in children. They've never demonstrated a faith in children to deal with these topics. And frankly, these topics are, in my opinion, a little bit beyond the scope of a public educator, not beyond the scope of the children, by the way. They're beyond the scope of the public education system to teach the children. That's what's being restrained here. It's a recognition of the failure of the public school system to adequately deal with these topics. That's what's going on. It's not a suppression of the teachers or anything like that. It's not even critical of the children. It's critical of the system. The system is a government system. It's not equipped for this. It's equipped for dealing to the median. And a lot of people think we should keep it there. But hey, what do you guys think? Let me know. I think Governor Abbott is trying to make up for his bad COVID takes. And I think he's doing an okay job of that so far. So we'll see how it goes. Hope you guys have a good day. Thanks for watching. Peace. Peace.